In 2001, an elite Spanish mountaineering team with special government clearance began ascending the northern face of a remote Tibetan peak. These veterans of Everest and K2 were perfectly equipped and facing clear weather. Yet before reaching the upper slopes, every single member of the team experienced a simultaneous, overwhelming psychological paralysis, a sudden, absolute certainty that a force deeper than their own minds had decided they would go no further. The target they failed to conquer was Mount Kailash. While the world focuses on high-altitude storms, researchers documenting this region are finding invisible barriers, biological mutations, and impossible time distortions that modern physics simply cannot digest. But this mountain is the center of a much larger global anomaly where reality breaks down. Join us and let's discover 13 forbidden places where modern science completely breaks. Let's go.
Topic number 13. Mount Kailash. A localized neurological signal forcibly rewriting human motivation is the only way to describe the invisible wall guarding the upper slopes of this isolated Tibetan peak. Multiple independent expeditions of elite athletes, professionally trained to manage extreme fear and physical discomfort, have encountered this exact same psychological boundary. When a heavily sponsored Spanish mountaineering team attempted a direct assault on the northern face under perfectly clear weather, every single member was hit with an instantaneous internal compulsion to stop. They experienced a sudden, absolute certainty that some part of their consciousness, deeper than their own willpower, had made a final decision. The entire team turned back simultaneously, without a single word of debate, abandoning years of rigorous preparation in a matter of seconds. Entire groups of veteran climbers, separated by decades and completely unaware of each other's experiences, have hit this exact same psychological wall at the exact same altitude. The mountain actively projects a barrier that strips away the human desire to proceed, ensuring no one takes another step toward the summit. Geologists monitoring the region recognize that this neurological interference requires a massive manipulation of localized magnetic fields, the kind of unseen force that actively corrupts living tissue and machinery. The psychological barrier effectively hides a much darker biological reality operating at the absolute core of the mountain, an anomaly that forces us to question what kind of localized radiation is leaking into our world.
Standing on the shoreline of a specific reservoir deep in the Ural Mountains for exactly 60 minutes will violently destroy your cellular structure beyond the capacity of modern medicine to repair. The water continuously emits a radiation dose of 600 roentgens per hour, making it the single most lethally contaminated exposed location on the surface of our planet. For decades, the Soviet government quietly used this completely isolated basin as a direct dumping ground for high-level liquid radioactive waste originating from the highly classified Mayak plutonium facility. They poured tens of thousands of tons of lethal material straight into the open water, operating under the catastrophic assumption that the lake entirely lacked underground drainage systems and would safely contain the radioactive nightmare indefinitely. When unprecedented severe droughts hit the region in the late 1960s, the water levels rapidly receded. The wind picked up the freshly exposed radioactive dust from the dry shores, scattering it for miles and severely poisoning 500,000 people across the surrounding remote communities. Today, the immediate perimeter remains strictly off-limits, constantly monitored by scientists terrified that the subterranean radiation plume might suddenly shift and migrate into the wider environment. The invisible poison trapped deep beneath the artificial surface is slowly moving through the water table, feeding directly into atmospheric systems that actively mutate the DNA of entire ecosystems miles away.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this.
Topic number 11. Hoya Baciu Forest. Hundreds of massive tree trunks spanning across this 250-hectare woodland bend abruptly near the soil, twisting into perfect uniform spirals that reach in bizarre directions instead of toward the sunlight. Biologists who have extracted core samples from these warped trunks confirm the wood is perfectly healthy, leaving them completely unable to explain the structural deformation. Located just outside the city of Cluj-Napoca, this dense patch of vegetation operates like a massive electromagnetic black hole. Visitors who step past the tree line frequently emerge hours later with severe, unexplained physical trauma, including chemical burns, acute rashes, and massive scratch marks that appear spontaneously on their skin under intact clothing. Compasses carried into the dense brush immediately begin spinning wildly, while complex electronic equipment drains from full batteries to zero in a matter of seconds. The most unsettling reports come from soil analysis teams who documented complete failures in their thermal imaging cameras, capturing dramatic temperature plummets in localized pockets of air that vanish as quickly as they form. Modern researchers hypothesize that immense deposits of unusual minerals beneath the bedrock might be generating localized magnetic storms. However, deep ground-penetrating radar scans have repeatedly failed to identify any such deposits, proving the physical laws of this region are being dictated by an entirely unseen force dropping down from the sky.
Topic number 10. Mapimi Silent Zone. An Athena rocket launched by the United States Air Force completely lost all navigation control and crashed hundreds of miles off course into a desolate patch of the Chihuahuan Desert. When military recovery teams arrived to retrieve the highly radioactive payload, they discovered that their state-of-the-art radio communication gear simply ceased to function the moment they crossed an invisible geographic boundary. This remote stretch of northern Mexico behaves like an absolute dead zone for electromagnetic signals. Television broadcasts, cellular networks, and shortwave radio transmissions are instantly absorbed or scattered by an unseen force the moment they enter the perimeter. Geologists who have mapped the soil profile found exceptionally high concentrations of magnetite and massive quantities of uranium deposits near the surface. The true terror of this region lies in how the atmospheric disruption violently alters biological development. Biologists studying the local wildlife have documented intense, highly specific mutations across multiple species, most notably yielding unique breeds of tortoises featuring completely deformed triangular shell structures found nowhere else on Earth. The localized vortex pulling meteorites from the sky is simultaneously rewriting the genetic code of every living organism trapped inside its radius, forcing researchers to search for other extreme environments where physical geometry is equally corrupted. Topic number 9. Yanaguni Monument. Submerged 25 meters beneath the volatile waves of the Pacific Ocean lies a gigantic stone monolith characterized by perfectly sharp 90-degree angles, towering terraced steps, and completely flat vertical walls. Stretching over 50 meters in length, this gigantic rock formation off the coast of Japan actively defies the chaotic randomness of oceanic fluid dynamics. Structural geologists maintain a deeply controversial stance, insisting that the immense blocks were carved solely by millions of years of powerful underwater currents fracturing the natural sandstone. Highly experienced marine archaeologists who have spent decades analyzing the underwater site completely reject this natural erosion theory. They point to hyper-specific details carved into the rock that water currents simply cannot replicate, such as perfectly circular post holes drilled into the flat terraces, dead straight drainage channels running alongside the steps, and an immense carved face resembling a massive sphinx. Carbon dating of biological material trapped in the deepest crevices indicates that if the structure was built by human hands, it had to have been constructed over 10,000 years ago, long before the end of the last ice age, when the area was above sea level. This level of ancient geometric precision implies access to a massive planetary energy source, the kind of raw, unrestrained thermal power that continues to erupt violently through uncharted subterranean fault lines across the globe.
Topic number 8. Shinay Timpishka. Rolling clouds of heavy steam completely obscure the surrounding jungle canopy as a remote Peruvian river flows at temperatures reaching 200 degrees Fahrenheit, instantly boiling alive any creature unfortunate enough to fall into its deadly current. Running for over 4 miles through dense Amazonian vegetation, this massive thermal anomaly discharges enough raw energy to power an entire city. The presence of a boiling river is scientifically common near active volcanic zones, as magma routinely heats groundwater to extreme temperatures. The catastrophic problem for geologists is that the nearest active volcanic system is located over 400 miles away, making the existence of this massive thermal output geographically impossible under standard models. Geothermal experts who have mapped the subterranean fault lines theorize that glacial meltwater from the high Andes Mountains is seeping incredibly deep into the Earth's crust, traveling for days until it is superheated by the mantle, and then shooting back up through an undiscovered fault line directly under the jungle floor. Local indigenous tribes have utilized the extreme heat for centuries, maintaining a deep reverence for the violent waters. The sheer volume of boiling liquid suggests a catastrophic rupture in the planet's internal cooling system, creating an isolated pocket of extreme environmental pressure that forces biological life to completely separate from the rules of the surface world.
Towering over 9,000 feet in the air, the massive flat summit of this sheer vertical plateau represents a terrifying shift in our planetary anomalies, proving that the Earth actively maintains isolated quarantine zones where our physics simply do not apply. Encompassing a massive border triangle between Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana, the geological formation is constructed of some of the oldest exposed sedimentary rock on the planet. The sheer vertical cliffs are impossible for ground-dwelling animals to climb, creating a biological island in the sky that has been entirely severed from the evolutionary timeline for over 2 billion years. Heavy, relentless rainfall constantly washes away soil nutrients, forcing the localized plant life to become violently aggressive. The plateau is covered in specialized carnivorous pitcher plants that trap and digest local insects to survive in the barren environment. The rocks are completely black, stained by unique species of microscopic algae that exist nowhere else, while tiny black toads, unable to hop or swim, crawl slowly across the fractured landscape. Thunderstorms violently strike the summit on a daily basis, carving massive, bottomless sinkholes into the quartz-studded rock that plunge deep into the mountain's unexplored interior. This alien terrarium hovering above the jungle canopy demonstrates how isolated geological structures can perfectly preserve conditions from an ancient, hyper-violent version of our world.
Topic number 6. The Richat Structure. A perfectly concentric series of massive geological rings stretching 25 miles across the barren expanse of the Sahara Desert stares directly up into space like a gigantic, unblinking cosmic eye. The sheer scale of this formation is so massive that it was not fully identified until the Gemini 4 space mission photographed it from low Earth orbit in 1965. Initially, scientists were absolutely certain the anomaly was a massive impact crater left by a devastating asteroid strike. Extensive ground surveys completely dismantled that theory, failing to find any shocked quartz or melted rock, which are the mandatory geological signatures of a high-velocity cosmic impact. The prevailing geological theory now attempts to classify the structure as a highly symmetrical geological dome that was lifted by deep subterranean magma and then sliced perfectly flat by millions of years of wind erosion. This explanation utterly fails to account for the flawless, mathematically precise spacing between the concentric rings of sedimentary and volcanic rock. The rings consist of alternating layers of hard and soft stone that form perfect vertical walls and deep valleys, creating a structural footprint that strongly resembles the foundational ruins of an obliterated ancient metropolis.
The geometric perfection carved into the desert floor suggests the deliberate manipulation of massive gravitational forces, exactly the kind of localized physical distortion that actively hijacks heavy machinery.
Topic number 5. Magnetic Hill of Ladakh. Heavy cargo trucks weighing thousands of pounds, parked on a desolate Himalayan highway, actively accelerate uphill against the undeniable force of planetary gravity. Located at an altitude of 14,000 feet in northern India, this barren stretch of road visibly slopes upward, yet vehicles left entirely in neutral will independently roll up the incline, reaching speeds of over 12 miles per hour. The official aviation response to this massive geographical anomaly is severe, as the Indian Air Force explicitly instructs all pilots to significantly increase their altitude and flight speed when passing directly over the zone to prevent heavy magnetic interference from hijacking their navigation instruments. Skeptical physicists aggressively argue that the entire phenomenon is merely a massive optical illusion, claiming that an obstructed horizon line, combined with the specific angle of the surrounding jagged peaks, tricks the human brain into interpreting a downhill slope as an uphill climb. Surveyors equipped with advanced laser leveling tools and highly calibrated GPS equipment have reported wildly conflicting data regarding the actual angle of elevation in the valley. Compasses open directly on the asphalt spin erratically, proving that a concentrated subterranean vortex is violently warping the baseline gravitational mechanics of the immediate environment. This physical distortion rips metal against the slope of the Earth, forcing biology to adapt to impossible subterranean pressures in other extreme zones.
Topic number 4. Blood falls. A violent cascade of thick, crimson liquid constantly bleeds directly out of the jagged face of the Taylor Glacier, violently staining the pristine white ice of the Antarctic McMurdo Dry Valleys. For decades, glaciologists assumed the dark red color pouring out of the 5-story frozen cliff was simply the result of standard red algae blooms surviving in the extreme cold. Deep radar scans recently shattered that assumption, revealing that the glacier is sitting on top of a massive, heavily pressurized subterranean lake completely sealed off from the atmosphere for over 2 million years. The water trapped inside this pitch-black vault is 3 times saltier than the ocean, preventing it from freezing even when temperatures plummet well below zero. As immense geological pressure forces this ancient liquid up through microscopic cracks in the glacier, massive concentrations of raw iron in the water instantly oxidize upon hitting the surface air, violently rusting and turning the waterfall blood red. Biologists analyzing the crimson discharge found millions of ancient extremophile microbes thriving inside the pitch-black, freezing, oxygen-starved subterranean lake. These organisms survive by physically chewing through the iron bedrock to generate chemical energy. The violently rusting water spilling onto the ice proves that biological life can aggressively conquer completely hostile environments, a terrifying adaptability that allows organisms to thrive in pure toxic acid. Topic number 3. Danakil Depression. Bubbling green ponds completely saturated with pure acid, heavy metals, and highly toxic chlorine gas suffocate the immediate atmosphere of a scorching Ethiopian wasteland. Situated hundreds of feet below sea level at the violent intersection of 3 massive tectonic plates, the thin crust of the Earth is actively ripping apart, allowing raw subterranean magma to boil the highly toxic groundwater. The resulting hydrothermal fields produce scorching ambient temperatures routinely exceeding 120 degrees Fahrenheit, heating a neon yellow landscape that mirrors a hostile alien moon. The extreme pH levels of the bubbling acid pools are so aggressively low that dipping a human hand into the liquid would instantly dissolve living tissue and bone. The global scientific community unanimously agreed for decades that this toxic environment was an absolute sterile dead zone, establishing the definitive limit where organic life could not exist on Earth. Recent extraction samples taken directly from the boiling acid pools revealed highly complex polyextremophile bacteria thriving deep within the lethal sludge. These microscopic entities easily survive simultaneous exposure to extreme heat, massive salinity, and concentrated acid,
completely ignoring the established biological boundaries of carbon-based life. This terrifying biological resilience in the face of absolute toxicity perfectly prepares us for environments where unseen radiation alters the structural integrity of the Earth itself.
Topic number 2. Potomsky Crater. Massive trees growing along the immediate perimeter of an ultra-dense Siberian limestone mound exhibit violently accelerated growth rings, perfectly mimicking the exact biological mutations documented in the forests surrounding the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Deep within the impenetrable taiga wilderness, a massive structure measuring over 500 feet across rises out of the trees like a gigantic, highly symmetric gray egg. Featuring a deeply recessed crater with a central mound, the formation strongly resembles a violent impact site left by a massive cosmic strike. There is absolutely zero evidence of any meteorite fragments in the surrounding soil, and no volcanic activity has occurred in this region for millions of years. Local indigenous tribes completely refuse to approach the area, identifying it as the Fire Eagle Nest, and warning that anyone who crosses the perimeter will suffer sudden illness and rapid death. Modern geophysicists conducting deep electromagnetic scans of the structure have discovered a massive, highly conductive cylindrical object buried hundreds of feet beneath the center of the limestone mound. The object is violently magnetic and absolutely does not match the geological composition of the surrounding bedrock. Whatever metallic anomaly buried itself deep into the earth beneath those shattered rocks continues to leak intense energy into the forest canopy, creating localized biological distortions that pale in comparison to the temporal anomalies guarding the final location. Topic number 1. Gyandrak Monastery. Perfectly healthy travelers completing the 52-kilometer pilgrimage route around a specific Tibetan peak routinely experience violently accelerated hair and nail growth, producing weeks of natural biological aging in exactly 3 days of walking. Extensive observational records hidden deep beneath the ancient Gyandrak Monastery describe a highly concentrated boundary zone where the fundamental laws of linear time completely break down. The psychological barrier we examined earlier at Mount Kailash is merely a defense mechanism protecting this massive temporal distortion. Mountaineers attempting to approach the summit report a devastating cellular fatigue, a severe physical exhaustion compressing weeks of continuous labor into a few hours of climbing. The ancient Tibetan texts do not describe the peak as a natural rock formation, explicitly labeling it as an anchor point where the standard flow of time becomes violently unstable. Geologists have recorded inexplicable magnetic anomalies radiating outward from the 4 perfectly symmetrical faces of the mountain, instantly disabling calibrated altimeters and aviation equipment. The deepest manuscripts warn of a massive subterranean chamber hiding beneath the rock, the Hall of Records, waiting for a specific environmental trigger to unlock. The unseen machinery buried inside that mountain remains fully active, aggressively manipulating local spacetime and actively mutating the biology of anyone who steps inside its radius.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.